as the Chief of Army Staff yesterday spoke of India's preparedness to take China on in case of a conflict, a former ambassador to China is now Foreign Secretary. But an India-China expert, Professor Tansen Sen of the New York University in Shanghai, is advocating that it's time to engage with China differently. While speaking to NDTV's Monideepa Banerjee, he said India needs to exercise caution over issues like Tibet, China's rising nationalism and its growing influence in India's backyard.
So Doklam is our latest hangover. We also have 1962. How does China look at these incidents?
So for a long time it was India which was hung over there. They continue to be hung over 62 war. The Chinese are, I think, in recent times hung over Doklam issue. For a long time the Chinese were not aware about what happened in 62. But in recent, let's say, 5–10 years, the Chinese have become more interested in border issues. Nationalism has grown in China, and they are tremendously interested in how the People's Republic of China deals with its neighbors. So they are getting the hangover now, and that is one of the major concerns when people in India and people in China become too nationalist. That prevents, I think, the resolution in border issues. And without understanding each other, I think the hangover will continue.
So what you're saying is competitive nationalism, something in which China seems to be outpacing India in its own neighborhood. I mean, look at Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and Pakistan, of course, and now even Nepal. What is it India should do differently?
We see mostly what's happening in our backyard, but I think the Chinese, with recent One Belt, One Road policy, is going all over the world. I think that's for their economic purposes, but it's connected to their political aspirations as well. India should also do the same thing. Nobody's preventing India from doing it. India should come up with its own Silk Road ideas and try to expand into different parts of Asia and Africa. Nobody is preventing India from doing it. I think India should be encouraged.
And of course there is Tibet. I mean, I was in Tawang in April when the Dalai Lama was visiting, and China was definitely not happy. What are your apprehensions on that front?
Yes, I think Tibet issue is perhaps more of a concern in the next few years as the succession of Dalai Lama comes into this picture of India-China relations. I think the earlier that the two countries resolve the border issue, the better, so that they can deal with the emerging problem of Tibet. The Chinese have their own concerns about Tibet. India has taken over the refugees from Tibet. And what happens in the next 5–6 years will actually either create another hurdle between India and China, or perhaps it will be a time for the parties involved to come to terms with each other about how to deal with the Tibet issue.
Now, this is not a Sino-Indian question, but there is North Korea, a country with which China has diplomatic ties, so does India. Mr. Donald Trump is unhappy. He feels China is not doing enough to curb Pyongyang. And of course, they'd be delighted if India snapped its ties with that country.
So there is some issue about the PRC dealing with North Korea. At some point they stop. But my concern is, do they actually know the person now ruling North Korea? The relations are quite different from what it used to be with his father and his grandfather, who were close to Mao and Deng Xiaoping. But now it seems the Kim Jong-un is not very well known by the PRC leadership. Look at the recent decision to go to South Korea for the Olympics. This came as a surprise. I don't know if the PRC leadership was involved in this kind of a decision. And so I think the expectations are quite high from the PRC side, but we should be aware that there are limitations as well with the PRC.
But China must be really concerned, with North Korean missiles flying all over the place.
Not only that, not only over Japan, but if there's a nuclear war, it will affect the Chinese border areas, and I think they are quite aware of that, because the winds blowing from one part to another can easily bring some of these nuclear fallouts into the Chinese cities. So I think they are quite concerned about it. They don't want a war in the Korean Peninsula, that's for sure, but how they deal with the North Korean leadership or the leader is not very clear, or if they are able to actually deal with that leader is quite problematic.
So bottom line, India must engage with China, and perhaps differently than in the past.
Well, it's the most important neighbor, the largest neighbor that we have. It has the largest population still in the world. It has a growing economy. It matters in the neighborhood. It matters globally. We should not only engage, but we should also try to understand what China is doing and perhaps get rid of our 1962 hangover and look at China from a different perspective. It will give us a different view than perhaps what we have for the past 55 years. I think time has come to look at China very differently and engage with China very differently.